So let me move to the highlight of the evening. You know, I wanted this question. You know, I have not had the opportunity until actually tonight to meet Frank. So I wanted to take a stab at, well, like, who is Frank Giustra? You know, is he somebody that helps in a very philanthropic way with his friends? Is he somebody that's receiving awards from world leaders for his generosity? Is he just a ham that really wants to be the next Marlon Brando? Or is he the generous benefactor that is currently spending $5 million to build a refugee center on the island of Lesbos for Syrians? And perhaps, maybe he's all of these men. So, just before I transition into Frank and David, here are some comments that one of his friends and what he has to say about philanthropy.
You know, I just loved him because he was so enthusiastic and he wanted to do all this. And I was overwhelmed when he told me that he was going to commit a huge amount of his life and a huge amount of his fortune to helping other people have their stories. And the thing I like about him is he's both idealistic and very hard-headed. So he doesn't want to waste his money and he doesn't want to waste his time.
A lot of wealthy people live under this illusion that having that wealth gives them something that the rest of us don't have, and it doesn't. It doesn't buy you peace, and it doesn't buy you immortality. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to convince people that instead of hanging on to that illusion that'll get you nowhere, is use that wealth to do something to better the world around you. And in that way, you're leaving a lasting legacy that will survive you. You've helped make the world a better place, and as importantly, if you have children, your children will have something to brag about.
So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my partner and colleague, Mr. David Sun, and our very special guest tonight, Mr. Frank Giustra, to the stage.
I think from the video we just saw, it tells us everything we need to know about Frank's passion for giving. But in fact, he is a man of many disciplines, including successful entrepreneurship in the areas of finance, mining, investing, the film and music entertainment production business, the olive oil and food industries, and of course, philanthropy. As we saw, he has partnered with former US President Bill Clinton to form, through a $100 million donation, formed the Clinton-Giustra Enterprise Partnership, and in 2014, he was also the recipient of the Dalai Lama Humanitarian Award. Frank? Yeah. Frank also recently returned from a trip to Greece, where he was boots on the ground with Syrian, to help with the influx of Syrian refugees. And as John mentioned, is helping to raise $5 million, including a substantial amount of his own capital, to help fund a reception facility that will provide overnight shelter along with bus transportation to many of these refugee families. Frank, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. We're very excited to have you here.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Now, you've been involved in business for many years. You've built multiple companies as a hugely successful CEO. I thought maybe a good place for us to start maybe is if you could provide a little bit of background around that time for you and when it was that you started to feel that need to transition from business to philanthropy.
It's something that happened very gradually, and as most things in life do, I think this feeling that I needed to give, and I always felt compassion for people that were in need, and that started at a very early age, and I have no idea where that came from. It's just something that I always felt. So I always gave from the time I was 12, 13 years old. And that continued into my adult life until, while I was accumulating my wealth. But the pivotal moment was when I met Bill Clinton. I used to listen to his speeches, and I saw in him a man that could motivate with words and really inspire people to just change the way they looked at the world. And I kept thinking to myself, wow, this is amazing. Here's a guy that just with words is changing the way that people think and the way that people approach social problems. And I thought, wow, maybe I can do something like that, and maybe not at the scale that he does it, but certainly, and I'm not a celebrity, I wasn't a billionaire, I was really just this person that had some ability, had some resources, and had a lot of connections around the world. And that's how that whole partnership came about, was just the inspiration that, wow, maybe I can do something that creates a change on a global level. And why not? It just seemed like something that, but the inspiration came from him.
Got a great quote from you. You've been quoted as saying, excess wealth can prove to be a heavy burden on your soul. Lighten the load, give back. The universe will smile back at you. Can you elaborate for us on the term excess wealth? And then secondly, can you describe that heavy burden? What did that mean to you?
Well, the term excess wealth came from Andrew Carnegie, the great philanthropist of the 19th century. And I've read, he wrote a paper called The Gospel of Wealth, which still makes for very interesting reading today. And basically his philosophy was, he was one of the richest men in America. And his basic philosophy was that excess wealth is that amount of money beyond what you need to take care of your own needs and the needs of your family. And his view was that excess wealth should be used for the good of society. And more importantly, that it should be deployed during someone's lifetime. Because you are the custodian, you're the one that created that wealth, you're the custodian of that wealth, and you best know how to deploy it in a way that is most effective. And that's how I read, his teachings on that. And that's what inspired me, and that's the way that I conduct my life, is that I look at excess wealth. So excess wealth can be different things to different people. Everybody has different needs in terms of what they need to spend from their wealth and to take care of their family and make sure that everything's taken care of. But you think about some of the wealth today, I mean, it's really excess. I mean, there are some, wealth is becoming very concentrated now in very few hands. And so excess wealth to a billionaire, I mean, have you ever thought about, thought about how would you spend $1 billion? And you should sit down and try and do that, and get a piece of paper and write down how you would spend $1 billion. And I promise you, after you've bought your mansion and your second home and your third home and your plane and your yacht and your art and your jewelry and whatever else, there's a lot left over. A lot, and then put a bunch aside for your kids or whatever you need to do. There's still a lot left over, and you have so many billionaires in the world. And so my view is that excess wealth is an illusion if you just let it sit there. It doesn't really impact your happiness. It doesn't make you immortal. It doesn't change anything. It's just this thing that you think you have. And so I look at excess wealth as something that you should use to better society. On the second part of your question, you talked about the burden.
Yes.
This is an interesting thing that I've learned just watching myself evolve in my own behavior. And I've watched, and I know a lot of wealthy people, and I've watched a lot of people and the way they behave when they come into wealth. And what I find is that a lot of people, and I don't say everybody, but a lot of people think that excess wealth is going to buy you peace and happiness. And the reality is it doesn't. It actually doesn't. And a lot of people go through a certain pattern of behavior as they accumulate wealth. They live a hedonic lifestyle, they spend, they try and create all of this happiness. And I think a lot of them find that, well, there's something still missing. It doesn't get them that happiness. And then they make that classic mistake of thinking, well, maybe it's because I need more money. And they start to think that there's that incremental dollar is going to have an inflection point that creates, happiness, and it doesn't. I think most of these people, and I certainly found that the more money you make does not equate to happiness, and it doesn't certainly give you peace. So a lot of these people make that mistake of trading in that freedom the money's supposed to buy you for a bondage to the money itself, and that really doesn't give you that fulfillment. And so I've discovered that just through lots and lots of conversations and observing people and watching my own behavior. So what I found in my own life is that when I started to give, and like I said, it started slowly and it felt good, but when I really put my mind to it about 8 years ago, everything changed, and it became an amazing feeling. It became my life. And philanthropy is the biggest part of my life. I spend more time on whether it's the Clinton Giustra partnership or the crisis group or the boys club here locally or the Street to Home Foundation here locally, and things like that come up like the IRC thing. It takes up most of my time, and I've never been happier than I am today. And it certainly hasn't been a kind market for my business over the last 5 years. We've been in almost a state of depression in the resource world, and whereas I used to think I had a lot of money, it's a lot less now than it used to be. But it doesn't matter. It really, at the end of the day, it's once. I know my family's needs are taken care of, and by the way, that slide up there that showed your bucket list. Don't get me wrong, it's not all about philanthropy. I live a great life. I mean, I do all those things, and I pretend to be a rock star sometimes, and I vacation, I see the world, I do all these crazy adventures. There's no shortage of fun, but where the money goes is to the philanthropy, and that's given me a peace that I've never had before. Like, I never had it when I was making it. I was always stressed out about and feeling guilty or feeling all sorts of feelings that come with a lot of wealth. And I think that when you start to give, and I've talked to many people about this, it does feel good. And the more you give, the better you feel. And that is absolutely true.
Well, if you don't mind me asking this one, is there that particular moment when you felt the universe smiling back at you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was confusing the universe smiling at me with the bull market in the resource world. And this is true. For a long time, I actually believed that it was karma, that the more I gave, the more would come back. I mean, I used to go around preaching that to people. I say, by the way, the more you give, the more it comes. It's magic. It's just, but it was. I was confused with the bull market, and that did end 5 years ago. And so, but really, and again, it's the more I do, and now I've gotten into talking about it and writing about it and trying to convince people that they should consider that path. And the more I do it, the more at peace I am with my life, with everything. And the big thing that's changed, and you might not believe this, but it's absolutely true, my concern about how much money I have, I used to be concerned about my net worth. I used to think, well, geez, it's this, and maybe this year it's that, and it could be a lot less. I don't care anymore. I actually don't care, because I know I've got enough to live a very happy life, and I do live a very happy life. I have a great time. But I will never have so much that I'm going to just leave lots and lots behind without it being directed to specific causes.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that path and that act of giving. Maybe just before we do, I have another short video clip that I'd like to play. Lawrence, would you mind rolling that?
I have children, and so I always try and put myself in the shoes of these people, pretend it's me. And how would you feel? You've got two small children, they're completely reliant on you. Their lives are in danger. They may drown at any moment, and you're helpless.
I love my home, I love my house, I love my street, I love my father, I love my mother, I love anything. I love all things in my country. I love my country. I love people. I hate the world.
This is a global humanitarian crisis. The world has never seen this many people moving from their homes, a number that exceeds what happened in World War II. There are little to no resources here. But where is the support from the people who are supposed to be giving that support? So that's what's really shocking. When we let our fellow human beings be pushed to the point where they have no other alternative other than to give everything up that they have and leave home.
ما دعا میکنم که هیچ کس از راهی که آمدن به اینقدر سختی کشیدن اینقدر پامو درد گرفت به این کوها هیچ کس دیگه نیایه درس بخونه دوستان درس بخونه دوستان دیگه جنگ نباشه دوستان جنگ نباشه اون کشوری که برن به کوچه بازی کنن خواب راحت خواب بشن راحت بخوابن دوست هیچی نباشه.
The reason we want to create that is to inject some humanity into what has already been a very hellish journey for a lot of these people. But there's no coordination, there's no one reception center that's close to the landing point. You know, let's build this first because this is what is needed the moment they land. So the basics, just tents, water, food, medicine, information, and transport. These are people, you know, they're school teachers, they're bus drivers, they're people that had a family and a livelihood, people that say that they love Syria, that, if the war stopped, they would absolutely go back. Imagine this happened in your own country and you have to escape to another place. Just put yourself in their shoes. These are human beings just like everybody else, and they have life stories, they have hopes and ambitions, they have children that they love dearly. If more people experience this, in a nanosecond, you would want to help.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this trip?
Yeah, the fellow you saw on there, Ahmed Khan, is a very good friend of mine, and I've known him for a number of years, and he is very well versed in refugee crises all over the world. He's done a lot of this work, and we were vacationing this summer. He's a good friend of mine, and he was telling me all about what was going on. And then I came back, and he texted me one day, and after our vacation, he had gone off to Lesbos, this island where most of the refugees are coming in. About 70% of all the refugees are coming in from Turkey into Lesbos, Greece. And he said, you have any idea what's going on here? And he started to describe how desperate the situation was. And because of all the political considerations, there are no real governments or multilateral organizations involved in this effort. It's really all volunteers. It's really a very sad situation, the way it's been handled. So he decided he was going to stick around and help and work with the IRC, and he thought one of the most important things that was needed was this reception center. People are landing on these boats, these overcrowded dinghies, day and night, and we saw quite a few of them. And they're drowning along the way, they've got babies, and they're landing and there's nothing there. There's just a bunch of volunteers that are trying to direct them to make their way to the other side of the island, which is about 40 miles away, to be processed and take the ferry to Athens, where they can make their way through other parts of Europe. And so he and the IRC came to the conclusion that what we needed was a reception center, which just provided the basics. This wasn't supposed to be anything fancy. It was really about just shelter and warm clothing and food and water and medicine if needed, and just security and some information, and then the transportation to take them to the other side of the island. And so he was asking for my help, and I went to meet him in New York, and we talked about it, and I said, Ahmed, I'm so spread so thin with all of my commitments right now. I'm running about 4 different charitable things that I'm responsible for the money for. And I said, I just can't take something. I'm happy to help, but I can't take this on. If you get somebody else to lead it, I'll just tag along and I'll do my bit. And he tried and he tried, and it just, and this is the other, the amazing thing about rich people, because we both know a lot of rich people, and no one was stepping up to the plate. So he kept coming back to me, and I said, okay, I'll do it, I'll help you lead the effort, but on one condition: I have to go and check it out. I need to see it for myself. I can't speak to something I haven't experienced. I need to see it for myself. So we went over there, and it was quite an eye-opening experience. It is one way of putting it. It was very emotional to see these people. I mean, we landed and we went straight to the charitable camp, which is the main camp for the Syrians. There, and we talked to a lot of the refugees. We talked to the people that were running the camp, and it was all great. And then we were driving back to the hotel, and it was dark by then, and we were driving on the beach road where all of these refugees are landing. And we saw 2 flashlights on the beach, and they were shining into the water, and obviously we knew what they were looking for. So we stopped the car, and I jump out to run to the beach to see what was going on, and I saw 2 guys standing. I thought they were volunteers, but they were actually smugglers. And the big scam there is that you've got the smugglers on the Turkish side and then the smugglers on the Greek side, and they work together. So the ones on the Greek side wait to get everybody off the boat, and all they care about is dismantling the boat. They puncture the rubber dinghy, deflate it, take out the plywood boards, and then they wrap it up and they get it back to the Turkish side for reuse. And it's a business. So I was trying to congratulate these volunteers that they were actually smugglers. And so all of a sudden I could hear, in the darkness, I could hear these voices, and I could hear babies crying. And so, that was really interesting when you see it up close like that. And I saw the boat, and we 2 or 3 of us jumped into the water, and we helped pull the boat in. We were helping people off the boat. And this lady hands me her son. He must have been, 4 or 5 years old. And that's when it just hit me. I just go, oh my God, this is real. These are real people. And the kids were crying, and I was carrying this kid, and I was in total shock. I was just standing there. I was frozen. I couldn't talk. They got me on film, and I was just standing there. I was just speechless. I couldn't believe when you actually see it up front and how real it is. That these are real people that are scared, and they're cold. And they're landing somewhere where they have no future. They've brought nothing with them, nothing. They have a backpack. And most of them are carrying babies and kids, and that was hard. I had to keep it together. It took a lot of effort just to keep it together during that half hour we were on the beach. And then the next day we spent the whole day on the beach, as these boats were coming in, and we were talking to people, interviewing them. We're making a documentary out of this to create an awareness of the situation. And you ask, the stories were really very similar, horrific stories. Some of the stories we heard would break your heart. I mean, really, the death these people have seen, and they've lost everything, they've given up hope. And that they all would love to go back to their country. And none of these people were coming over for economic opportunity. They were coming because it's a war zone. There are 11 million displaced people in Syria. They have no homes, and they're going into places like Turkey and Jordan and Lebanon, but they're trying. Some of them are trying to make their way to Europe, and it's because they have nothing to go home to.
Frank, what you've described here is certainly a crisis situation. But a moment ago, you had mentioned when you were approached on this, you were already spread really thin from your other commitments, and now another one's been piled on. And there's no end to probably some very worthy causes to support, including, as John mentioned in his talk, some ones right here at home, to which I know you're involved in many as well. I think something that might be really helpful for the audience, because I know all of you get approached many times, and no doubt, Frank, this is happening to you all the time. How do you choose?
Well, as Laura, who works with me, can testify to, it's hard because we get called on a lot of different things. And for a long time, I was like that song, I'm just the guy that can't say no. And it was hard because, you know, people come in and it's always through a relationship, through, you know, a connection. Somebody, can you do me a favor? Can you do my friend a favor? It's, you know, it's my cause, it's his cause, it's whatever. And, you know, for a long time, I was trying to help almost anybody that came through the door. But now I just tell the truth. I'm just stretched thin. I've got a global commitment with the Clinton Giustra partnership. I mean, this is really truly global. We're expanding our social enterprises all over the world now, and that takes money. I mean, you know, these things have to be funded, and the money comes from me. You know, the Crisis Group, which is a very important organization trying to prevent the conflicts like in Syria, and so I've been their chief fundraiser now for a number of years, and that's a big job. And then I got all my local stuff here too, you know, the Boys Club and the Street to Home Foundation and everybody else, all the other things that I haven't even mentioned, and it's hard. So, but now I just say, listen, I can't, I'm sorry, I just, with the exception of something like this refugee thing, which I just felt I had to do. I felt I had no choice, no one else was stepping up, I had to do it. But I would have been very glad had someone else stepped up to the plate on that one, because we all have limited resources, and it's just money is it's limited. You have to. I'm not a billionaire. I don't have billions of dollars to give away. So you just have to tell the truth, and occasionally you make an exception because it's something that resonates with you. Right. But you know, really, at the end of the day, for most people, just choose what it is that you believe in. Whatever it is that you have a passion for, and just do that. And when other people approach you, just say, listen, I do my bit for society, you know, and this is it, this is mine. And I respect that, you know. I approach people when I'm raising money for various things, and a lot of people tell me, you know, I've got my own thing. And I say, good for you, great. You should have your own thing, at least you're doing something, that's great.
Earlier you mentioned Andrew Carnegie, so I've got a good one here. We've seen evidence that not everyone, given their resources, is inclined to be charitable. We talked about this when you and I met in your office, and in a piece that you wrote, which is called The Fork in the Road to Enlightenment, you also referenced Andrew Carnegie. What do you think it is that differentiates those who are compelled to be charitable from those who are not?
You know, the basics are, you know, culture. Culture is big. We in the Western world, especially North America, have a culture of giving, and we always have. We are probably the most giving society on earth. There are a lot of cultures that just don't believe in it. You know, places in Latin America, you know, Russia. There's lots and lots of places in the Middle East, you know, that giving isn't part of the culture, and if it is, it's very small. And it's done for religious reasons. So I think culture, your own upbringing, you know, people are raised to believe certain things, and they believe certain things. And you know, some of it is just who you are as a person. Some people just have more compassion than others. Some people feel more for other people's needs than others, and that's just how we're made up. But I think the most important factor that would inspire someone that wasn't prone to giving to give is to see an issue or someone suffering from something up close and personal. When you experience and you meet the people that are either poor and want to be alleviated from poverty, or are ill, or are homeless, or you know, suffering from conflict, when you meet them as human beings and you hear their stories, you would have to have a heart of stone to not feel the need to help somehow, okay? And I think that most of us, and I wrote about this recently, I wrote about this in my last article, live in a bubble. And we all live in a bubble. We live in our little bubbles, which are our communities, and we live in a great bubble, Vancouver. You know, it's a great city, and it's safe, and it's clean, and most of us have a home, and we're well fed, and you know, there's no one shooting at us. And that's our bubble. And then we live in even smaller bubbles of our own businesses and our own cliques, you know, where, you know, the only important thing to us is what is happening within our own little group of people and what we can gossip about and get involved with, and what our egos are all about, confined to those bubbles. And we don't look outside those bubbles. And it's easy to get caught in that bubble. I've done it. And I've seen other bubbles, Hollywood bubbles and Wall Street bubbles, people that live in their own world and can't see that there's a need outside their own world, which is where they could do a lot of good. And I think that if you could find a way to expose people to those in need, it would absolutely solve everything. If I could get plane loads of rich people and fly them to Lesbos and have them interact with the refugees, things would happen. If you, as I did, walked the streets of Vancouver and spoke to homeless people when we were doing the research for the Street to Home Foundation, I went with this lady that was sort of the patron saint of the homeless in the city, and she walked me around for 2 nights in a row till 5 in the morning, talking to homeless people and getting their stories and understanding what the problem was and why they were on the street, and seeing them as human beings. And that's where I think the difference is. If more people would step out of their bubbles and actually interact with those in need, you would solve a lot of the world's problems.
In our discussions leading up to this evening, we spent some time talking about running, engaging in philanthropy like running a business. How has being a business leader challenged the way you give, and what key strategies do you apply to philanthropy?
I think that, and most people, no, I wouldn't say most, a lot of people are afraid to give. A lot of people that have accumulated wealth are afraid to give. And they're afraid to give because they think the money will be wasted and it's not going to achieve its goals. And I think that if you are an active philanthropist, if you've created some wealth in your life and you want to dedicate some of your time, like Andrew Carnegie suggested, do it yourself. Don't wait till you die and have somebody else do it. Do it for something you care about, be the custodian of your wealth, and you will care a lot more about how it's spent than some trustee will down the road. And so I think if you look at any social issue and you look at it as you would look at any business problem or the execution of a business plan, it's the same thing. It really is. You have to understand, tread very carefully. You have to really get an understanding of what the issues are in the first place. And I can give you a number of examples where we did that, whether it was Street to Home or whether it was the Clinton Giustra stuff, to really understand the need and then craft a business plan, how you're going to address that need and solve that problem on a sustainable basis. So you're not continually pouring money at something. You find a solution that addresses a problem that is sustainable.
Well, maybe we can touch on that. Because just before we started this evening, and you and Lara and I were talking about the work that you're doing with the Clinton Giustra Enterprise Partnership, and we were talking about sustainability, and I found that to be a really unique and interesting model, and maybe you can share a little bit more about that. We
launched the Clinton Giustra Partnership in 2007, and for about 6 years we tried a lot of different things, and it was always about poverty alleviation, but we addressed it from many different angles. Some things worked, some things didn't, and that's the other thing about philanthropy. You should really be prepared to modify what you do and change and make mistakes. That's okay, as long as you're learning from them. But what we did is, finally we brought in a new CEO for the Clinton Giustra Partnership that was from the supply management business, and he did about a year's worth of research into everything that we were doing and the needs of the communities that we were trying to help, where poverty was very severe and where job creation would alleviate that in a sustainable way. And he came up with 3 models. And that's when we changed the name. That was the Clinton Giustra Enterprise Partnership. And the reason we changed the name to Enterprise Partnership is because we created 3 models that are social enterprises. And they're set up within our foundation to be profitable, for-profit businesses, but within the foundation. So we never take money out. The money always stays in and gets recycled and into other programs and other programs. But each of the enterprises has to have a profitable business model. And there are three. There's the training centers for the needs of whatever and we've looked at needs for tourism and needs for call centers. We have the supply chain for agricultural products into value-added products for large corporations that need it at scale, and that's probably our biggest one model so far. And then the distribution model, which is 20% of the world's population lives in rural areas. In rural areas, you have no stores, no access to household products like hygiene products and soaps and reading glasses and all sorts of things that you can go to any corner store here. And for 20% of the population, that doesn't exist. So we created the Chikipi model, which is these women entrepreneurs that we train, and then we give them all their goods on consignment, and they walk around to these rural areas with their backpacks and sell door to door, like the Avon lady. And it's an amazing model, and you can do this anywhere in the world, and we are now doing this in other parts of the world because it's so easy to set up. And companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever, they want to be our partners, and they want to help us set these up because they get to access a percentage of the population they would have never accessed before. So it's beneficial to everybody, and that makes it sustainable. And it's the same way for the agricultural products, whether it's the cashew fruit in India or some other thing that a company like Pepsi or Coca-Cola needs the end product at scale, and they need it to certain quality standards, and they need it guaranteed on time. So what we do is we reverse engineer all of those needs from some of these very large corporations right back to the producers of the product, and we put in all of the quality controls and the technology and the supply chain in between to get that product to meet the needs of that corporation. And what you're doing along the way is creating jobs for the supply chain, and you're raising the income levels of the farmers by 2 or 3 times. And so it's a very easy thing to create that is sustainable because there's an actual commercial need for that product, and they're paying real money for what they need. And they wanted, the Pepsis of the world and Unilevers of the world, they all want to do this for their own corporate images. They need the product, but they also know that they can brag about creating a social good out there. So it's that whole thing that Clinton says is doing well by doing good. And so all of these things are sustainable. They're all profitable businesses, and we want to create lots and lots of them all over the world, and impact and improve the lives of millions of people. And this is going to be my life's work. This is something that, I think at the rate we're going now in the number of countries that the demand is so great for what we're creating that we're hardly keeping up. But it really does impact the lives of people and raises their income. It brings them out of poverty. It gives them all sorts of options to what they can do with their families and with their children and education.
I've been waiting for this one all night. You started a charitable movement called Dear Rich People. And no offense, but for all intensive purposes, we're talking to them right now. Can you tell us a little bit more about this campaign? Is there anything about this movement that we haven't yet discussed tonight that you'd like everyone here to know?
Well, like almost everything in my life, it started as just an idea at 3 in the morning. I thought, okay, someone had just talked me into doing Twitter. It's Chantel Sinrader. Said, you should tweet. And I said, okay, I don't know what tweeting is, but I'll learn. So I signed up for Twitter, and I'm going, okay, now what do I say? And so I started tweeting things that I thought could help my businesses or help all of the philanthropic things I'm involved in. And then I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to just create a message, just little tidbits of ideas for wealthy people in terms of how they should live their lives, look at wealth, think about purpose, think about their children. And they were all meant to be just little tidbits of information, little thoughts that would provoke them to think, to just get people thinking. And I found that we created a Dear Rich People Twitter site, and we started doing this. But I thought it's hard to just do that. I wanted to do something a lot more, and I wanted to write articles on this. I really wanted to write about all of these subjects which relate to wealth and purpose in life. And and Philanthropy. And I had it in my mind I kept thinking about Huffington Post. And, you know, other ideas were brought to me about other outlets to write for, and I just thought, I don't know why, I wanted the Huffington Post. And we tried through regular channels to get to the Huffington Post, and they turned us down. And like, we tried doing it the way that people do, you apply, and, you know, and I just couldn't get anywhere. And lo and behold, I'm in New York one night, and I'm invited to a private dinner, and they sit me right next to Arianna Huffington. So I thought, well, here's my chance, okay? So I started to chat her up, and I said, she had already done some research on me because it was a very private dinner involving something we were involved in, and so she started telling me about my love for cooking. I said, I know you love cooking. I said, great. So we struck up a conversation, and I started to tell her about my beliefs, and then she goes, you should have a blog on Huffington Post. I swear to God, that's actually what happened. And now, for 8 months now, I do a monthly piece for HuffPost USA. And in each of these articles, what I try and do is I try and strike an emotional chord in people to get them to think. And so I start with a theme, but I try and weave it into an actual story of something that has happened to me or I've seen happen to somebody else. So I tell a story, and I tell a story of whatever, and then I try and bring it back to the idea, the central theme, whether I'm talking about the fact that, you know, we all live, we have the greatest gift of all, which is life. And some of us go, well, why are we here? And what's the purpose? Well, you know, the purpose is, one of the purposes can be that you can go through your life and touch as many people as you possibly can in a positive way, such that it changes their lives. And that's the movie, It's a Wonderful Life. I wrote a whole article. Have everybody seen that movie, right? The theme of that movie is that, you know, every life is important, and that even though you think your life is not important, you've touched people. If you've touched people in a positive way, you change their lives, and it gives therefore it gives your life meaning. There was a purpose. You weren't just empty space, you know. You came here for a purpose, and when you leave, you've left and done some good, and you've left some good behind you. So every article I do is a theme about whether it's what we talk about, living in a bubble, that we all live in a bubble, that the concept of privilege, the idea that I speak to my children a lot about privilege and how privileged they are, how lucky they are, and that comes with a responsibility. So you talk about that, and you talk about giving. I mean, I've got so many ideas in my head, and I will keep doing this, and someday it'll be a book. And but it's just how I see the world and how I want to provoke people to think about it.
Let's talk about children and privilege, because, and you did warn me in advance, I've got about an hour's worth of more questions here, and I see our countdown timer, we've got 2 minutes left. And I wanted to sort of end on family and legacy. And you're a family man, I know you have 2 children. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, and when it was for you, and how you've gone about bringing them into the philanthropic work that you do.
My kids are my greatest joy in the world. They're it. And I made a decision a long time ago that I was going to be a great dad, and that I was going to be there for them in a way that I unfortunately didn't have when I was growing up. But their mother and I both recognized early on that we have a life of privilege. We can't hide the fact that we live in a nice home and drive nice cars, and I had a plane and the whole thing, and it's like you can't hide that stuff. It's there, right? So how are you going to deal with this stuff with kids? And so we both made a coordinated effort to teach them from a very early age the concept of their privilege, and to talk to them about it, and to, more importantly, because kids will watch what you do more than they will listen to what you say. So you have to act through example. You have to teach them by your own example. And both their mother and I are very philanthropic. She is great. She does some amazing things. So these children have grown up with 2 parents that really believe in the idea that you have to give back. You have to give back in every way you can. And we make, they do all sorts of things that we bring them into where they see, they actually participate in things so that they see homeless people and understand what the issues are. And when they got to a certain age, I started to talk to them about it. You know, and it's hard at the beginning because small kids don't understand. But I remember one day we actually sat down and we sat in a room. They wanted to ask me questions. So I said, okay, let's sit down, ask me anything. And they started to ask me about all of the stuff that I do. And there were great questions, and they really got interested. And it got to the point where I know now they're excited about participating in some of the stuff that we do and being involved. And I'm really excited about the fact of getting them out there, you know, if I can work around the school schedules so that they see this stuff for themselves. I think that'll be the greatest gift I can give them.
Any thoughts on how you would ensure that they'd continue your legacy?
Well, you know, I tell my children, you're gonna live your life the way you see it. And I'm not, we've always told our children, you're gonna choose your career, you're gonna choose your life path, we'll be there to support you. But, you know, you have to think always about helping others in whatever way you can. And so the legacy, I just hope that they're proud of us, and that through our example that they will do something on their own. I think they will. I think they're both very clued in now, and I think they will, whatever they end up doing, and we will certainly, if that's the life path they want, there's certainly an opportunity within, you know, the foundation to do that down the road. You know, I want them to go to school first, get a job, learn the real facts of, you know, how to support themselves, and then we can talk about, you know, philanthropy.
I know we're out of time, so we're going to do one last one here. What do you hope your children will say about the example that you've shown, and what legacy do you wish to create?
You know, it's all about the kids. I'm living my life so that my kids will be proud of me, and I can't think of a greater gift than someday when I'm long gone that my kids go, you know, Dad was a pretty cool guy. You know, he had a big heart and did a lot of great things, and if they're saying that about me down the road, that's all I want. And I just want them to be proud of me, and I'm giving them everything, you know, to do that. And I'm doing this for them mostly. I'm doing it for other reasons too, but I really, it's about, you know, I don't love anything more than I love my kids, and I just want to make sure that they grow up with all of those, having lived that experience with both what their mother does and what I do, and that they're proud of us.
Well, Frank, I don't think there's any question that the legacy you're leaving will inspire your children and the next generation any more than it's inspired all of us here tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your stories with us, and we're truly grateful to have had you here with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was truly inspiring. I'd like to ask you, of all your philanthropic participation, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate microfinance? In order that, I mean, I believe that microfinance is something that really breaks the chain of poverty. So is that something that you would support?
I endorse it. We don't do it in any of the things that we do. I'm familiar with it. I know if it's like anything else, if it's executed properly, it does help a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise have access to fund their small business. So I completely endorse it. And I've seen it all over the world, in Africa and Asia and in Latin America, and I think it's great. I think, you know, again, there's so many ways to address poverty, and that is definitely one way to do it.
So, right here, is there a question right here?
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. I'm wondering, how do you reconcile having wealth, knowing that the way you manage your wealth potentially can create and exacerbate many of the problems that you then turn around and try and address?
Yeah.
So in terms of your advisors, the decisions you're making about managing and investing your money, how do you reconcile that paradox which keeps me awake at night?
That's a really good question. And, you know, unfortunately, we live in a world that is structured to allow for wealth creation by many that shouldn't deserve it. And you know, wealth creation, when it's done through hard work and industry and building something and, you know, creating wealth in a way that, you know, is good for the community is wonderful. I have no problems with that. But the way that wealth is created, some of the wealth is created today, the people that are making it do nothing. You know, they're trading things, they're playing with paper, they're using the system to create wealth, and I have a real problem with that. But once the money is made, because the system allows it, you have to just accept reality. We live in a system where wealth is created in many, many different ways, and unless you're willing to change the system, you can't really bitch about it. You know, it is what it is. You know, we all benefit from it, and some of us suffer from it, but it is what we vote in, the politicians we vote in, and that's what we get. My bigger issue is once the wealth is created, I don't care how you made it, then do something with it, you know, and to try and reconcile, to lay awake at night to think about the issues that you think about. I almost think, okay, so what's, you know, obviously I don't invest in tobacco, and, you know, there's a lot of things I won't, I've been asked to invest in a lot of things that I just think are morally wrong, and I just won't do it. But that's a personal thing, and, you know, it doesn't, you know, I can't really preach that to anybody else. I think it's always going to be a personal decision that you have to make. But it's almost a waste of time to think about that. And I think it's because unless you're prepared to change the system and the way that everybody operates, because if you're not doing it, somebody else is. It's, I think, more important to say, okay, we're living in the system. Okay, there's all this wealth being created. Now, what do you do with that wealth? You know, let's do something useful with that wealth to, you know, create a greater good. And that's, you know, I'm a little bit more sanguine about it. I just don't. I don't think you can change the way the world works.
We have a couple of written questions. One of them, actually, Frank, was this, is that it's very important for you to have your philanthropy be very effective. You spend a lot of time making sure it is effective. So what would you advise a smaller donor, somebody not having maybe the resources that you do, how best to use their time in combination with whatever financial resources they've got?
Yeah, that's a good question, because not all of us have the luxury of running our own charitable organizations. You know, I have a number, but then that's what I chose to do. I think for a lot of us, it's, you know, you have an amount of your wealth that you want to put to some good, and you want to put it in somebody else's hands. And then it's a question of doing your homework. And what I found is that in every aspect of philanthropy, there are people that do it really well, and there are only one or two of them that do it really well, and then you got a million other people that are all trying to do it and do it almost 100 times less well. and that's the biggest flaw of charity, is that most people don't really think through who is going to, if they're not doing it themselves, choosing the right organization that's doing the right job of deploying that money intelligently and getting results. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that in every cause, there are too many people trying to do the same thing and doing it very poorly. And if they would only just give their resources to the ones that are doing a great job, or pioneering a new idea, or being the best at it, it would be much more effective than trying to replicate something badly. And I'm telling you, most people that don't do their homework are giving their money without checking out the performance of those organizations that deploy the money. And that just takes a little bit of homework. So if that money is meaningful to you, if 10% of your wealth or 20% of your wealth is meaningful to you, before you give it away, do your homework. And you know, stay away from there are a lot of things to stay away from, you know, celebrity causes, and, you know, people that don't think through, you know, they get married to an idea and they don't do their homework and they piss away a lot of money. And I see a lot of that. And that's just, you know, to get sucked into that is probably the worst thing you can do. You know, you really have to do your homework wherever if you're not running it yourself.
What might be some of the biggest mistakes you've made in philanthropy?
I think, you know, again, giving just because someone asked, which is, we all fall into that trap. It's a friend, a business associate, or a friend of a friend. They come in, well, I'm doing this thing. And they go, I really need you to support it. And you go, okay, and you support, and you've done really no homework into where that money's going, and a lot of that money gets kind of not spent well. That is, I think, a common mistake that everybody makes. But I think that some of the mistakes that I've made, when we launched the Clinton-Giustra partnership, it was all about getting involvement of all of these people that were going to help us. There were companies that were helping us, corporations. There were celebrities that were helping us. And we made the mistake of buying into some of their pet projects just to get things done. In other words, if you want to do this, you have to also support my that. And we did a bit of that, and that was a mistake because it really didn't, it was money that just, I don't think was as well spent as it should have been. And so, and again, we compromised ourselves by just to get things done. And I think discipline is probably the biggest thing that you learn in this game is like, you got to just learn to say no. You say, sorry, I don't get your support, fine, who cares? But I'm not going to compromise our approach to something we believe in just to get you on side. And a lot of people do that. They trade favors.
Another question, completely different kind of question. Somebody would like to know, are or were your children involved in a school where service, quotation marks, was part of the curriculum?
Yeah, my son is in high school now, and it definitely is, and they actually get credits for it, which we didn't have when I went to high school. But he explained the whole thing to me, and that they have to do a certain number of hours throughout their entire term at high school that goes towards their credits, and they have to choose what it is and document it and do it, and and I think that that's fantastic. I think that that's I wish we'd had it when I was a kid.
So do you see, Frank, your children either, are they currently or will they be eventually actively involved in what you're doing on the philanthropic front?
I don't know. I really don't know. I've always shied away from telling my kids what they should do with their lives. I was having this conversation with my son yesterday and was going, you really have to do whatever it is you love. Just find something you love and do it. I hope philanthropy is going to be part of it. The opportunity will be there for them to do it, but I'm not going to shove it down their throats. They have to do it because they feel it. The worst thing you can do is mandate somebody to do something that they don't believe in. I think they will believe in it. I took my son to a boys club event last summer with all of these at-risk boys from a number of different schools that we mentor and we help along, and I've been doing that for 17 years, and he had never been, so I decided to bring him along to this thing. And he sat there and he listened to some of the stories that were being told, and I could see on the ride home he was very quiet, almost in shock. And so I asked him what was wrong. He said, he was feeling horrible. Some of the things that he had heard, and he felt embarrassed about being in the room because he was the rich kid, right? And he thought, they're all looking at me, why is he here? And he's the rich kid. So I had to talk him off the ledge on that one and basically say, no, first of all, I didn't believe that was the case, that those kids were thinking, and they weren't. But then we talked about, the fact that he was privileged and he shouldn't be embarrassed about that. It's not his fault. He was born into a family that has some wealth. I told him there are two things. It's what you do with your privilege that counts, not that you have it. And secondly, never show off or brag about your money. That I've seen some real disgusting displays of wealth recently by really rich people that is so off-putting that it's crazy how some people just don't think. And I would never want to see my children behaving that way. When you get some of these trust fund kids in that I've seen in the U.S. that have never worked a day in their lives, and they're just spending money that's given to them every month, and they behave horribly, some of them. And it's just like, I would never want my children to behave that way. So, and I know they never will. I just can see by their character because they've been influenced otherwise.
Well, thanks very much, Frank. And we're now running out of time, so I'd like to thank Frank and David for what they've done here tonight. It's been a great presentation, and Frank, your insights into philanthropy are quite amazing. So thank you very, very much again for being here tonight.